it's only happening in Long Beach right now as far as me doing something for the community, because that's where my heart lies at as far as straightening out my own neighborhood before I go elsewhere.
Chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer and clearer, but...
While the world's attention has been locked on headlines from the courtroom and chaos in hip-hop, federal agents have been working quietly behind the scenes, and their focus has zeroed in on one man, Snoop Dogg. The FBI's Organized Crime Division has reportedly reopened 2 long-dormant investigations, each stretching nearly 3 decades deep. The first traces back to that tragic 1996 night in Las Vegas that claimed Tupac Shakur's life. The second dives into a broader network of money, influence, and silence that's kept some powerful names untouchable for years. And according to insiders, both paths now circle around Calvin Broadus Jr., better known as Snoop Dogg. That's shaken the whole industry. For years, Snoop was the chill survivor of Death Row Records, the one who kept peace while everyone else fell apart. But this time, the whispers say it's not about image or old rumors, it's about knowledge. Federal sources hint that agents are analyzing old pager records and revisiting sealed testimonies that could connect Snoop to events surrounding both the Shakur and Biggie shootings. No one's speaking on record yet, but people close to the Justice Department describe pre-arrest briefings already in motion. If that's real, it would be the first time since his 1996 acquittal that Snoop's name appears in an active federal case. And this one could flip the entire hip-hop world upside down.
I think that they don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make a...
The overlap between those circles is what caught the Fed's attention. And now, agents are reportedly cross-referencing phone records and flight logs that show key figures showing up in both. The theory? Simple, but dangerous. That Snoop might have known or even gained from information traded within that network long before the world ever heard a word about it. This could blow the lid off everything. To see why this matters, you've got to rewind to the last few months of 1996. Within just 90 days of Tupac's tragic death, Snoop didn't just walk away from death row, he wiped the slate clean. The same man who once embodied West Coast street politics suddenly dropped the colors, cut ties with Suge Knight, and abandoned that old brotherhood lifestyle overnight. Instead, he reappeared with a brand new deal under Master P's No Limit Records. A fresh image that looked less like reinvention and more like damage control. Back then, analysts called it a smart business move, but looking back now, it feels like a man scrubbing his fingerprints off a scene no one wanted to talk about.
Everybody else was scared of that.
Right.
Everybody, that's when Suge Knight was the monster, the boogeyman.
Right.
That's when he was the boogeyman.
And now Suge Knight himself, speaking straight from prison on his podcast Collect Call, has thrown gasoline on that theory. Earlier this year, Suge said he needs a real conversation with Snoop about what happened in Las Vegas. That wasn't just talk for drama. Every word from a prison phone gets recorded. The fact he said it publicly, that's what shocked everyone. Even Snoop's old circle is starting to raise eyebrows. According to 3 insiders tied to Suge Knight's legal team, Suge wasn't just venting on those prison calls. He was negotiating. They claim he's been quietly trading information with federal agents, dropping details that could twist Snoop's sudden exit from death row into something far deeper than self-preservation. This is getting serious. Meanwhile, former Outlaws member Napoleon has been digging up old wounds in recent interviews. He swears Snoop's split from Tupac wasn't about music or creative differences. It was envy, and the numbers back him up. In early 1996, All Eyes on Me exploded with over 9 million copies sold, while Snoop's Dogfather barely hit half that. Inside Death Row's wild cutthroat empire, where profits meant protection, that kind of sales gap could easily spark resentment. Napoleon says the jealousy wasn't just emotional, it got financial. With Suge funneling millions into Pac's projects, Snoop's status at the label was slipping fast. So when Tupac's death rocked the industry, Snoop's next move wasn't mourning, it was escape. But the contradictions don't stop there. In Snoop's own retelling of that tense flight from New York to LA, the one right after the East Coast versus West Coast feud peaked, he described sitting silently with Suge and Tupac the entire way, and by his own admission, he had a blade tucked up his sleeve for protection. To most, that might sound like paranoia, but to investigators studying the timeline, it screams foreknowledge. Something about that flight just doesn't sit right. If Snoop really feared an attack from his own circle, then he must have already known things had gone way past the point of no return. Later, in interviews from the 2000s, Snoop described the moment he saw Tupac lying in that hospital bed. Tubes everywhere, barely hanging on. He said Afeni Shakur, Pac's mother, looked him straight in the eye and told him, "Get up, fix your face, and say goodbye like a man." It was a heartbreaking story, but also one that raised major questions. If their bond was that real, why did Suge Knight later accuse Snoop of betrayal? And why did Snoop never clap back directly to those accusations? His silence became another piece of the mystery, especially once the federal probe heated up again in 2025. That's when Jaguar Wright, the outspoken singer who's made a name for exposing what she calls the dark side of the industry, went on Piers Morgan's show and dropped a bombshell. She claimed Snoop knew about both tragedies long before the public ever did, and even accused him of being part of a quiet network of enablers around Sean Combs. "Anyone who thinks he won't talk is crazy," she said, pointing toward Combs' alleged awareness of his own circle's actions. Her words lit up social media in minutes, reigniting debates that had slept for decades. And the timing was wild, because right after Sean Combs' sentencing, prosecutors began quietly revisiting old connections tied to his so-called private gatherings. The pattern looked way too familiar. Sources tied to the West Coast investigation have quietly confirmed something that's giving this whole story new life. Several names found on Sean Combs' early 2000s guest lists reportedly match contacts listed in old Death Row Records books seized during earlier raids. Sure, it's circumstantial, but it's enough for federal agents to dust off certain files and take another look. That's no coincidence. Meanwhile, Suge Knight's prison podcast keeps exploding in popularity, mostly because of the heavy hints he keeps dropping. In one recent episode, he talked about an unnamed West Coast legend who left the label like a man who already had his bags packed before the body hit the ground. The message was crystal clear. Everyone knew who he meant. And when you line it up, the timing of Snoop's No Limit Records deal looks too sharp to ignore. It was signed just weeks after Suge's imprisonment, and even Master P admitted publicly that Snoop came to him while Death Row was collapsing, desperate for a way out.
I try to, better myself every day and try to grow to be a better musician, a better person, and just be, more in control of the power.
Moves like that don't happen overnight. They take planning, and Snoop seemed one step ahead. By 1997, the transformation was complete. Snoop's image flipped from street soldier to spiritual man of peace. He stopped preaching vengeance and started preaching balance. On CNBC and VH1, he said The Dogfather was his rebirth, a way to move past the chaos and leave Death Row's darkness behind. It all sounded like growth, but skeptics saw something else: damage control. Around that same time, the FBI's Shakur case was quietly collapsing for lack of evidence, and nearly everyone connected to it either vanished or refused to talk. 2 decades later, Snoop stood untouched, a rebranded icon, hip-hop's calm and collected elder statesman. But behind that calm image, the contradictions kept piling up. When Suge Knight went back to prison in the mid-2000s, Snoop suddenly started calling him one of the best businessmen to ever come out of the West Coast. To some, it sounded like forgiveness, but to others, it felt like calculated diplomacy. The same man Snoop once dissed on records was now being praised like a legend, and fans couldn't tell if it was guilt or strategy. But Suge's version of their last meeting paints a darker picture. According to him, Snoop looked him in the eye and said, "I could have saved you." Many fans thought it was closure, a man showing grace to another. But Suge's tone told a different story, like there was a hidden meaning. When he later repeated that phrase on his Collect Call podcast, the FBI reportedly flagged it, because in the context of a reopened homicide file, "I could have saved you" doesn't sound poetic. It sounds like withheld truth, and the pressure's only grown since then. Napoleon, the former Outlaws member, has been going off in interviews throughout 2024 and 2025, accusing Snoop of rewriting history. He says Snoop's been downplaying Tupac's anger toward Bad Boy Records just to make himself look like the peacemaker. He even told The Art of Dialogue he's trying to take that shine from Shakur. To outsiders, it might sound petty, but in Death Row's world, image meant survival. The one who looked calm was the one who got out alive.
You get these type of individuals always kicking dirt on Pac name after they made their millions from doing these documentaries.
And now, with Sean Combs serving time in a facility described by reporters as hell on earth, federal investigators are digging deep into every old connection he ever had. The Bureau has already issued subpoenas for digital records tied to artists who worked with Bad Boy Entertainment between 1994 and 2004, and some of those names once again circle right back to Snoop Dogg. This storm's not done yet. That stretch of time also covers Snoop's big public reconciliations, those moments when he shared stages and smiles with Sean Combs at award shows and industry events. What once looked like powerful unity between East and West now feels more like dangerous proximity to something much darker. And at the center of all this noise sits one chilling detail: the pager message that allegedly circulated among insiders minutes before news of Tupac's shooting hit the world. Several witnesses have hinted that this message exists, but none have ever shown proof. The rumor says Snoop himself got that alert while still on the plane heading back to LA. And if the FBI manages to confirm that timeline, it could completely rewrite the story, not just of one violent night in Vegas, but of how hip-hop's biggest rivalry truly ended. You can practically feel the tension climbing now. Every new interview from Suge Knight's circle seems to drop one more piece into place. Every new motion from the feds tied to Sean Combs' case seems to reveal one more link between old rivalries and new alliances. What used to sound like wild industry gossip is starting to look like a web, one built on leverage, silence, and timing. And that's where the real question hits hard. Did Snoop Dogg rise from the ashes of death row because he was lucky, or because he already knew when the fire would start? As investigators chase that pager trail back to its source, the line between coincidence and coordination keeps getting thinner, pulling Snoop closer to a past he thought was buried, and dragging the entire industry toward a reckoning they can't escape. The Department of Justice doesn't reopen old cases without leverage, and by 2026, they finally got it. 3 cooperating witnesses, each with their own motive. Suge Knight, whose sentence review hangs on what he reveals. Jaguar Wright, who's already named Snoop in a sworn statement. And a third mystery witness. Identity blacked out. Someone close enough to Tupac to know exactly what went down that night in Vegas. For prosecutors, that's not gossip anymore. That's live evidence. And the first major clue points right back to Snoop's no-limit deal. On paper, it looked like Master P saved him from a dying label. But in reality, he might have given Snoop something even bigger: jurisdictional distance.
Snoop Dogg saying he owns Death Row is no different than me saying Tupac was alive because I had the unreleased Tupac music. It ain't no different, bro.
No Limits base in New Orleans pulled Snoop out of California's legal grip, far from Death Row's lawsuits and chaos. Master P's empire was smart, built through corporate layers across Houston and Baton Rouge, making subpoenas nearly impossible. For a man escaping one of hip-hop's most dangerous labels, that wasn't just a comeback. It was protection in plain sight. Some even call it the slickest exit strategy in rap history. The timeline practically speaks for itself. Late 1996, Tupac's case still open. Early 1997, Snoop quietly signs with No Limit. By the end of that same year, Sean Combs' Bad Boy empire blows up nationwide. And by 1998, both homicide investigations go completely cold. It's a clean line of silence stretching across 3 cities. And according to a 2025 FBI briefing, analysts flagged that overlap. They noted how both Snoop and Combs used sudden business expansion to build distance from the chaos that helped create their fame. Convenient, right? Now the Mann Act looms again. The same law that brought down Combs. Most people only know it for the high-profile transport charges, but hidden inside is a clause for conspiracy to obstruct justice. It covers anyone moving money, people, or info across state lines to hide a federal crime. When the feds apply that to Snoop's 1997 relocation, the story changes fast. Moving his label, staff, and sessions from LA to Louisiana starts to look less like reinvention and more like relocation of evidence. Even filmmaker Alan Hughes once said, Snoop dipped his light so Shakur could shine. Poetic back then, but now it sounds strategic. He didn't dim his light out of humility. He did it for deniability. While the FBI was tracking gang ties inside Death Row, Snoop was already flipping the script, turning into a family-friendly brand, starring in commercials and stacking endorsement deals. Every time investigators circled back, the trail went cold, buried under TV contracts and clean-cut image makeovers. But federal memory never fades. With Sean Combs' conviction still fresh and Suge Knight talking again, agents now have access to witnesses who once swore silence. Old death row security staff are being questioned, distributors hit with subpoenas, and even estate managers from the late 90s are facing pressure over missing royalty records. Snoop's name keeps surfacing, not as a defendant, but as a person of interest tied to key disappearances. And this time, Jaguar Wright's testimony isn't being brushed off. She's claiming there were secret charity events in the early 2000s, private meetings where Combs, Snoop, and others allegedly settled old accounts. The Bureau's quiet, but insiders say her timeline lines up with suspicious wire transfers between record labels that same year. And that redacted third witness? They've reportedly handed over phone logs referencing a pager message sent just before Tupac's shooting, linked to a device model used by Snoop's own crew. Coincidence? It's looking less like chance and more like a trail. The leaked phrase is chilling. Message confirmed. Move complete. Whether real or not, it's reignited every theory about who knew what and when. Even Master P's old team is feeling the heat. Former No Limit execs are distancing themselves, saying they were focused on music, not legal drama. Still, the optics sting. The same label that rescued Snoop also shielded him from California investigators for years, letting him rebuild his fame while others from death row either disappeared or fell. The feds know what they're looking for now. Not just crimes of action, but crimes of silence. Who kept quiet? Who gained from that silence? And behind closed doors, whispers from retired agents say the Bureau's real question isn't if Snoop knew about Tupac's fate, but if he negotiated it. The clean exit from death row, the instant no-limit deal, the lack of retaliation. It all feels too neat for that era's chaos. You don't walk off a battlefield spotless unless someone already cleared your path. Each month, another domino drops. Suge leaks a hint, Jaguar posts another cryptic claim, prosecutors pile on new files, and Snoop, quiet. Too quiet. It doesn't look like innocence anymore. It looks like a deal, the kind of deal that keeps a man famous, free, and forever untouchable. And if the whispers are real, the next indictment isn't being written. It's already waiting for a signature. So what happens when the FBI finally decides that calm smile isn't charm, but cover? When the man once seen as peace itself becomes the centerpiece of a federal conspiracy? Could the industry even survive a truth like that? Or has it been living inside that lie the whole time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story's far from over. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and keep that notification bell on. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Stay curious, stay watching, and remember, every legend's got a secret, and some secrets never sleep.